So lately, one of the interesting developments that happened in Lebanon is this announcement that Egypt is ready to provide Lebanon with gas through the Arab gas pipeline that goes through Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and through Lebanon. At the same time, Jordan being very much interested in providing electricity to Lebanon through the network, again, going from Jordan through Syria and then to Lebanon. That was a big announcement made for several reasons, and definitely it has political implications, more than having really an impact on the electricity situation in the country. So if we want to go back a bit in time, we can say that even before this financial and economic crisis, Lebanon has had electricity problems for years and for decades. Lebanese and people residing in the country used to pay two bills, one for the public utility, Électricité du Liban, that provided electricity running heavy fuel oil, and the other bill was for the private generators that used to provide and complement what the L couldn't provide, and they used to run on diesel. So for years we had that, and we had actually difficulties in the sector, poor governance, poor infrastructure, and on top of that, political interference, corruption, political bickering. So all of that existed already, but Lebanese had 24-hour electricity complemented between the public and the private. So with the shortage of dollars that we face in the country currently, with the crisis, the financial and economic crisis, very severe, and with the shortages of dollars, basically, what happened, it's like there were shortages in electricity because there was no money anymore to buy fuel or to buy diesel to run electricity in the country. And suddenly people were facing 0 hours electricity. So imagine in 2021, not having 1 hour of electricity in your home or at work. So it was something very dramatic, and the government needed to look for solutions. And they needed like fast solutions, and they needed solutions that will cost almost nothing for the short term at least. So least costly solutions that requires no payment of dollars today to anyone that would want to help, but on the contrary, leave it for later as debt or whatever. But because today the government has problems with dollars, they wanted solutions to increase the hours of electricity and the generation of electricity, but without paying money for it now. So what the government has done, actually, it went to first to the Iraqis, and they have done a deal with the Iraqis that was a swap, where Iraqis give us heavy fuel oil that is not compatible to the Lebanese power plants, but there could be swap. And therefore the government created the swap system where the government receives the Iraqi oil or Iraqi fuel, and then there will be another company that takes that fuel and exchanges with fuel that is compatible to the Lebanese. That was the first, if you want, solution that was really what the Lebanese or the Lebanese government wanted, because it didn't cost money, because the Iraqi government didn't ask for money for the fuel oil. They said, we can have goods, services in return, but now today we don't want money from you. And that was really something that the government wanted. So on the other side, the Iraqi oil is not sufficient. So the big news, if you want, came from, as I said earlier, from Egypt wanting to help and Jordan wanting to help. And this is because the situation was really catastrophic, and Egypt and Jordan wanted to help Lebanon. So basically, as you know, Egypt wants to become the gas hub in the region and wants to be able to export its gas, at least to the region. So I think that fits into the Egyptian plan and objectives. So therefore, providing electricity or gas through Lebanon and crossing Syria and providing even gas to Syria goes within the plans of Egypt. At the same time, for Jordan, it's the same. Jordan wants to become the electricity hub of the region, where they want to be able to export the surplus of electricity that they have to the region. So it was convenient for them to give electricity to Syria and to Lebanon. So actually this deal, when it was announced, it was a big deal on the technical side and on the political side. So basically on the technical side, that meant that we need to make sure that the infrastructure is good, at least from the Syrian side, because for years Syria has had war, and the pipeline that will cross from Syria is damaged or kind of functioning, but maybe it needs infrastructure. So we had to understand what kind of investment it's needed for the infrastructure, and the same for the network, for the electricity network, how much it is damaged from the Syrian side and how much help it needs to build that infrastructure again to be able to provide electricity and gas to Lebanon. So this is being kind of looked at now. There have been meetings, technical meetings to discuss all of these and to fix them. Another technical problem, I think, that nobody now is talking about, in Lebanon at least, is how can you guarantee that the gas you will be receiving from Egypt is Egyptian gas and not Israeli gas? Because as you know, since 2019, 2020, there is Israeli gas in the Egyptian market. And for now, nobody is talking much about that, but this is one risk that maybe at any moment it could be surfaced and talked about in Lebanon, in Lebanon and in Syria, because you know what the situation is between Syria, Lebanon, and Israel. But on the political side, there were new realities coming to surface, and this is that, first of all, as we know, there is the sanction on Syria, and Caesar Act is one of these sanctions put on Syria, and whomever works with Syrians might be sanctioned as well. So the first, if you want, sign from the Americans that came out saying that we are ready to revise that sanction and look at giving a waiver to the Lebanese and to the Jordanians to use the infrastructure in Syria, and at the same time to let Lebanese and Jordanians use the Syrian territories to make this happen. So to get gas from Egypt and to get electricity from Jordan. Until now, we don't have the official waiver. So officially, the Treasury in the US hasn't clarified or hasn't informed the different stakeholders that they have given the waiver. But they were good signs, positive signs that we are ready to contemplate. So now we are working according to what we've heard from the Americans, but on the ground and or officially, there is nothing happening, and we don't have the waiver yet, neither us nor the Jordanians. The other political reality is that the soonest Lebanon got the sign, if you want, kind of that the Americans are ready to open up to contemplating a waiver, automatically the Lebanese government formed a delegation of ministers and went to Syria for an official visit. And this has been the first time that there was an official visit on that level of ministers and open in public that went and visited Syria. And that opened the door to questions: is there going to be normalization between the Lebanese government and the Syrian government because of this project of bringing gas and electricity through the territories of Syria into Lebanon? So the first, if you want, visit has happened. Since then, nothing much has happened on that front. But there are signs in the country where people are discussing that this is a new phase and there will be more of normalization between Lebanon and Syria. So this is a new reality on the ground. And even with Jordan, you see that with Jordanians, there are faster normalization, if you want, and openness of relations between Jordan and Syria. And there have been many visits, ministerial visits, since this issue of a possible waiver from the Americans against the Caesar Act. So these are the realities on the ground that we are seeing, an American readiness for to give waivers to Lebanese and Jordanians and the Egyptians, etc., about opening up relations with Syria. Lebanon opening up again officially to Syria. But is this to counter the Iranian influence in the region? You can say that yes and no, because currently what we are seeing in Lebanon, on the contrary, we're seeing that there is more and more influence of Iran in the country, because at the same time that this whole project of Egypt giving gas to Lebanon and Jordan giving electricity to Lebanon, it was in parallel with the time where the head of Hezbollah had announced that the Iranians are ready to provide Lebanon with diesel so that it eases the crisis they're living in. So for the Hezbollah camp and for the pro-Iranian camp, they've seen the American reaction as being a reaction to the Iranian willingness to help Lebanon. So on the contrary, what is being seen in the country, perceived in the country, is that Iran has more influence than the Americans, and the Americans are reacting to that, but they are failing, because today the Iranians have been successful in getting into the country diesel oil that supposedly is sanctioned by the US, and supposedly the US would not allow these products to be traded, right? But today, publicly, Hezbollah has been able to enter into the country Iranian diesel, and this hasn't been sanctioned. And now in the Lebanese market, you have Iranian diesel. So for the Iran camp, they see this as a success, and definitely as a victory against the US and against definitely the US sanctions that are put on Iran, right? So because Hezbollah feels that they are fighting a battle not only in the country, but against the US and against what the US is doing in Iran. So therefore, the perception in the country, in Lebanon, is that no, this action is, the US action is not countering the Iranian influence. At least it is not being successful, right? But at the same time, the American waivers and this is the easing of economic activities, at least between Jordan and Syria, Lebanon and Syria, the Jordanians and some of the Arab countries see it that this could help in the future to counter the Iranian influence, because you're bringing back Syria to the Arab fold and you're not leaving it in the hands of the Iranians. But is Iran the most influential actor in Syria? No, because you have Russia. And here you would think, like, what is the Russian role in the region? So on the project of bringing gas to Lebanon and bringing electricity to Lebanon, the Russians don't have much of a role, right? It is limited. Their role is very much limited. But what will happen to Syria, and how this relation between Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Syria, what the role of Russia will be, that is important for Syria, right? Because the King Abdullah of Jordan, when he floated the idea of let's open up to Syria and let's kind of decrease the influence of Iran, and let's kind of create a new reality on the ground in Syria, that idea, when it was floated first by with the Americans, and the Americans were on board, the King of Jordan, they later went to Russia to get the buy-in of the Russians as well. So the Russian influence is definitely bigger in the Syrian context, but not on the Lebanese side. In Lebanon, the Russians still, they don't have that influence that they have in Syria. But definitely, this is, again, an American blessing with the Russian blessing to open up for the Arabs in Syria, definitely. And we, Lebanon, are getting the benefits of that, because at the end of the day, we are in a crisis, and a humanitarian crisis that is being really making it more difficult with this electricity crisis that is unbearable for people because you cannot function without electricity. So basically, this is the situation in Lebanon and in the region. This project will help ease the crisis, the electricity crisis, but it will not solve it, because the electricity sector needs real reforms, and everybody in the country knows that there are reforms that would need to happen so that there is more of a modern infrastructure, so that Lebanon, the public utilities can themselves provide electricity 24/7 instead of relying on private generators. So that is a long shot that needs to start today. But at least today, the government is trying to find short-term, fast solutions, and the Iraqi support with the Arabs, with the Egyptian support, with the Jordanian support, we are getting there, but this is not enough. We need to look at the longer term solutions, sustainable solutions, which is like to work on the governance of the sector, to work on building new power plants that run on gas and supported by investment in renewables. Only these will have like sustainable impact on the electricity sector. All the rest will be just like short-term solutions.